Hey everyone, and welcome to the All It Takes a Goal podcast, the best place in the entire world, including all of Canada, to learn how to build new thoughts, new actions, and new results. I'm your host, Jon Acuff, and today I'm joined by Nona Jones. Who's that? I'm so glad you asked. Nona Jones is an international speaker, author, and the head of global faith-based partnerships at Facebook. Have you heard of Facebook? It's doing pretty well. Facebook has done all right these last few years. Nona held executive leadership roles across the private, public, and nonprofit sectors in her career. She's a graduate of the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. Nona was named one of Essence Magazine's Under 40 Women to Watch and Florida Trend Magazine as one of Florida's 30-something all-stars. She is currently president of the Gainesville chapter of the Lynx Incorporated and serves on the University of Florida Digital Advisory Council. She's done a million things. She has a brand new book coming out, and we're actually friends. We've done a number of events together. It was one of the situations where we were in green rooms together. I'd see her speak, and I go, oh, she's fantastic. She needs to come on the podcast. That's how it happened. So we're going to jump into the podcast. But first, a quick message about the sponsor of today's episode. Every year, I set crazy big goals, and every year, there's one productivity tool that I use to help me reach them, the Finish Calendar. I've been using it for over a decade, and it's helped me crush goals like running 1,000 miles in a year, growing my business, and writing a New York Times bestselling book. Thousands of people have bought them over the years too. Why? Because it works. It's not magic, it's science. Study after study has shown how important tracking your year is. But my favorite came from the University of Konstanz in Germany. They showed that when you track when and where you're going to work on something, you double your chances of success. Let me say that again. You double your chances of success. This calendar is massive. It's beautiful, it's motivational, and it comes in paper or dry erase. On top of all the other amazing features, you can choose to display it vertically or horizontally because this bad boy is also double-sided. If you've got a big goal or a lot of big goals, grab a Finish Calendar today at finishcalendar.com. Once again, that's finishcalendar.com. Let's jump into my interview with Nona Jones. Nona, I'm so glad that we get to talk today. We connected maybe a couple months ago in Dallas. We were in a green room. We'd kind of done a bunch of things together, but never been in the same space. And we finally got to hang out. And I knew immediately, I said, hey, you got to come on the podcast. So thank you for joining me today on All It Takes is a Goal.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jon. It's truly a joy to be here.
And we were laughing a lot before we even started the recording, which is always like podcast rule number one. You never don't miss the good stuff before you record. But I was joking about your bio because your bio is impressive. So there's a couple things I want to hit on. One, at 23, you were appointed to your first executive role with a Fortune 500 company, 23. You were on Essence Magazine's 40 Under 40 Women to Watch. Fantastic. You're a songwriter. You've written a bunch of books. So my first question, especially for a podcast called All It Takes is a Goal, is were you always a go-getter? Like, were you one of these kids that's like, I had a paper out at 4, or is it something you learned over time and you just kind of picked up speed and momentum?
Oh, man, I love this question because the answer to that is yes. And the reason why I was always a go-getter is probably because as I reflect back on my life, from a very early age, I remember that my mother, she didn't typically feel proud of me or say kind words unless I brought home a really good report card. Other than that, it would usually be, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. She would call me fat. There was just all this dysfunction happening. And so I think that my ambition was really fueled by rejection, just being totally transparent. And so I can remember from an early age, really trying to make my teachers proud, trying to make my classmates laugh, because it was very performative. And even becoming an executive at such a young age, I can now see that so much of that ambition really came out of a toxic place. But yeah, that's always been the case for me.
So it came out of a toxic place, but you've clearly worked on it. So you've redeemed that ambition, because it's not, I think sometimes when you have that background and it's the fuel has been toxic, you think you can think, well, I should just not be that way. Right. But you're a person who's designed to do great stuff. And so you didn't say, okay, wow, because the fuel was bad, the Ferrari must be busted too. You said, okay, I need to change that. What were some of the things you did to kind of go, okay, I am designed to be driven in a good way. I am designed to do something big. How did you kind of redeem that ambition then?
Well, so first of all, it's striking, and I'm sure you've done this research, but um, a vast, I won't say majority, but a vast number of wildly
Mhm.
successful people came from very traumatic pasts. So whether it was, fatherlessness, poverty, maybe they grew in a home where there was violence and drug addiction,
Mhm.
and that's a typical experience in very successful people. I think the point of redemption for me, it came with the realization that as much as I had achieved, I just wasn't happy. Like it was a point at which I realized. I remember it vividly. I was actually at the White House. I was at an event. It was, the president was there, the first lady was there, heads of state, dignitaries, leaders from around the country were there. And here I was. I think I was maybe, I don't know, 27, 28, 29 at the time, so really young. And I remember looking around the room and I was like, wow, I can't believe I was actually invited to be here, as if somehow I should belong here. I don't feel like I belong here.
Mhm.
And I think that was the moment in time when I started to do some internal exploration to figure out, how is it that they think I belong here, but I don't? Like, what is happening inside of me? And I began to figure out, oh, wait, this has roots in words that were spoken over me
Mhm.
as a child, to where,
Mhm.
yes, I technically deserve to be in this room, but I don't believe I do because of things that were
Yeah.
said to me.
Were you, and this is, I love that your very first answer to the very first question wasn't like, I've always had a day planner, I have a calendar. You were like, well, I had some deep rejection as a child. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like minute one, let's go, Nona. This is
Yeah.
why I wanted you on the podcast. Have you been able to, with your mom, have that discussion? Like, is this like, and again, like if you want to go, hey, whoa,
Oh
but like,
no, I'm a really transparent person, which is why
okay,
I started where I started. Because
yep.
personally, and this is like a sidebar, I'll come back to your
Mm,
question. I think we spend so much of our life living behind a mask, pretending to be something that we're not,
mm,
trying to get people to accept us for who we're not, that we end our life basically not even being ourselves. And so, to
mm,
that point, I did try to have the conversation with my mom, and I did try to tell her, hey, there were some other things that happened in my childhood that I think lent themselves to other dysfunction in my life. But in having the conversation with her, she basically just kind of said, "Hey, it's not my fault." She even said it was my fault as a person. She was like,
mm.
"You was your fault." And so,
You as a 6-year-old, that was your
oh,
fault. Like as
correct.
a yeah,
Yeah, it was my fault.
yeah.
And so but I will say this, John, like, I think even that in some ways was empowering. I made a post recently because I was reflecting on the role of rejection in my life.
Mhm,
And what I realized is rejection was actually a gift, because it can be a gift, or of course it could be a curse depending on the
mhm,
condition of your heart. But for me, it was a gift because what it did is it caused me to be able to stand on my own. I
mhm,
realized that, number one, my mom was wrong, and I didn't internalize it, and I didn't see her opinion as my truth. And so, in many ways, rejection has actually helped me to be more of who I am. So
mhm.
it's not always a bad thing.
It invited you to Nona faster than maybe you would have gotten on your own.
Yes, that's right. I love
How
that.
how did you not get stuck in like a cycle of blame or victimhood? Because it would have been
Mm.
completely easy for you to go, this was my lot in life. I had a tough background, so
Yeah.
therefore I had a tough past, so I have to have a tough future. How did you not get stuck in that? Or what are some of the things you do to go, no, you know what? I got a future ahead of me. Here's what I'm building. Here's what I'm doing.
I was actually there for many years. I would say
Mhm.
in high school and in college, I absolutely I blame my mom and my circumstances and how I was raised. But I think it was realizing that regardless of what happened to me, I remember one time I was a microbiology and cell science major, and I was in organic chemistry. And there were these kids in the class who were talking about how I wasn't the smartest and I wasn't this and I wasn't that.
Mhm.
Back in those days, there was such a thing as affirmative action. And they
Mhm.
even said, oh, you're just an affirmative action case. That's how you got
This
here.
is in
Oh, yeah,
college.
this was
This
in
is
college. This was in college. And in that moment, I could have accepted what they said. I could have received their
Mhm.
assessment. But I scored an A on the exam and they got a C. And what I realized in that moment was that, yes, people can think lowly of me. People can even say I don't deserve to be here. People can think, that somehow I'm a special case. But that's not necessarily the truth. And so that was the point of inflection for me, where I realized I could create a different future regardless of my past. And so it became a moment of kind of empowerment. I hadn't yet done, I think, the self-work that I needed to do to really get healed from the past. But I at least had that insight that my future and my past are actually not completely connected. There's an influence, but they're not connected.
It's not one-to-one. It's not,
right.
the past isn't the predictor of the exact future.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting. Did you develop self-awareness over time? Because it's very self-aware to go, some students made fun of me in a really terrible way. And then later when you get the grade, you go, wait a second, I did this. They did. Like, there's a lot of self-awareness in a lot of your inflection moments at the White House. There is self-awareness something you work at? Is it something would you say you were always self-aware, or it's been something you've practiced?
It's something I work at now. I think, as I look back on my life, and it's so funny, I kind of almost feel like I'm having a therapy session right now. As I look back over my life, what I realize is part of what happened as a result of my trauma as a child is I did become, I think, hypersensitive to myself, like hyper aware of what I was feeling and what I was thinking. And now I know that some people who experience trauma can have the opposite effect, where they become numb.
They go numb.
Yes, they go numb. And so I had the effect where I just became hypersensitive to myself. And man, how is this making me feel? And what do I need to be thinking about this? So yeah, I think that's part of my posture and my orientation in life, is just to think about, how is this landing on me, and process that.
Yeah. And I think it comes through in what you write. And your new book, I certainly think it comes through. I mean, if you've listened to the first 10 minutes and you're like, oh man, Nona's really honest and really brave in the discussion, that's what her writing's like. So the new book's about comparison, which I don't think anyone on the planet is like, what? Why do we need a book on comparison? Everybody's got that figured out. Like, if anything, like, everyone's drowning, and you wrote a book about how to float. So from your position, and you work for Facebook, which is really fascinating. Like, that's a fascinating wrinkle for a comparison, because I think most people would say, like, social media is part of my comparison. What made you want to write a book about this topic to this culture?
Well, let me tell you, I wrote the book because if you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago if I was insecure, I would have said absolutely not. I would have said, of course I'm not insecure. I mean, look at all I've done. Look at all I've accomplished.
You're at the White House at 27.
I mean, come on, right? Like, but I had an experience. This was back in 2020, early 2020. I had an experience happen that actually made me confront myself. What happened was, like 2020, I had a full calendar of speaking engagements. Y'all, 2020 was going to be lit. Like, that's the word.
It was going to be so good, dude. It was going
to be so lit. 2 books coming out. I was speaking on
Nona Jones.
Continents. Like, it was going to be amazing. Well, of course, all that got canceled. And I was sitting at my computer one morning, getting ready to log on to a video meeting. And I just kind of logged on to Instagram to respond to comments. And I caught a glimpse of my news feed right before I went to respond to comments. And a friend of mine made a post where she said, oh, I'm so excited because I'm speaking at this huge women's conference. It's going virtual. It normally meets in person. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I scrolled down and I saw another friend who was so excited to announce that she was speaking at the same conference. Scroll down again. There's another friend who was so excited. And so I scroll and scroll and scroll. And I kid you not, John, at least a dozen of my friends were speaking at this conference. Mind you, I knew all the speakers. I knew the host. And so in that moment, I thought, why wasn't I invited? Like, why wasn't I invited? Why was I overlooked? Why was I not good enough? Why her, not me? It got so bad, John. I went to their profiles on Instagram. I was like, how many followers do they have? Like, I went to their website. I was like, let me see what other events they're speaking at. Like, it was crazy. And so it was in that moment where I was going through this whole process. And then another thought came to me. Instead of like, why them, not me? Why am I not good enough? The thought that came to me was, why does it matter? Like, why does it matter that I wasn't invited to speak at this event? Like, why am I now spiraling into these questions of inadequacy? Listen, I knew this conference. I had heard of it before. I had never, ever desired to speak at the conference. Like, it was never a thing where I was like, oh my gosh, this is the apex of my speaking career. It was never that.
This is my dream. This is my dream.
No, but it was in that moment when I saw all of my friends and peers speaking at this thing that it triggered something in me that made me realize, wait a minute, there's a seed of insecurity on the inside of me, and I've got to figure this out, because I mean, I should be secure. I should be able to see these people succeed and not feel like a failure. But I felt like a failure in that moment. So that's why. That's where it came from. That's what started my journey.
So that curiosity of, okay, I'm doing this. And I feel like great books often start that way, where the author, especially nonfiction, has a question about their own life. They work on it to figure out a solution. Then they go, do other people have this same question? And then they find out, wow, they do. It's worth doing a book because it'll help a lot of people. And it feels like that's where this got started. My wife, the joke she'll always do is like, if we don't get invited to some party, I'll be like, oh man. And she'll go, well, you wouldn't have wanted to go. Right? And I always go like, yeah, but it'd still be nice to tell them no. I would still have liked to have told them no if they invited me. Like, because it'll be a group, like, it'll be something I would have hated doing. It'd be like some boat tour.
So
like,
true.
And I'm like, I don't want to do that boat tour through downtown Nashville, but I would have liked to have been included so I could say no to it. Yeah, so funny. It's so human. And I think one of the things I like about the book, I love alliteration. I'm a son of a pastor, so I love alliteration. I want to talk through your 3 R's, if you will, kind of your comparison detox process of recognize, reframe, and release. Can you walk us through that? Because somebody listening right now will go, okay, comparison is a really big topic, but I think you get really practical with a lot of the advice you give. It's not just hey, stop it. I think books that say stop comparison as if, oh, I'll just turn that off. I didn't know it was a switch. Thank you for that very helpful book. But you actually get tactical. So can you hit us up with recognize, reframe, and release?
Oh, you got it. Well, let me first set this up by saying, comparison, not all comparison is bad. So, so physiologically, when we inhale air into our lungs, when we take in air, we feel invigorated, we feel enlivened, we feel energized. Well, that is the physiological process known as inspiration. When you inhale air into your lungs and you feel invigorated, you are essentially inspiring air. When you see someone doing something amazing and you are invigorated and you're enlivened by it, it's called inspiration. And that happens because of healthy comparison. What I deal with in my book is toxic comparison, because the opposite of inspiration physiologically is when you exhale air out of your lungs. And when you do that, you feel fatigued, you feel tired. As a matter of fact, when you take your last breath, it's called your expiration date. And so when you feel expired, when you feel exhausted, when you feel like you can't measure up, that's toxic comparison. And so what I want to deal with in this kind of 3-part framework is, number one, you have to recognize when toxic comparison is triggering insecurity. Because and going back to your earlier point, many people blame social media for comparison. And while I do believe that social media exposes our insecurity, I don't believe it's the source of our insecurity, because 2 people can look at the exact same post. One person can walk away inspired and another person can walk away expired. So you have to recognize, when do I feel expired and what's happening with that? And why do I feel that way? What are the thoughts that are running through my mind? Recognition matters, because you cannot and will not change what you don't acknowledge. Many of us will, like I said earlier, many of us will deny insecurity until our death day. I'm not insecure.
Yeah. I got it all together. I
I want everybody to succeed. I love everybody. But then,
all like rising tides lift all boats. Yes. I heard some people say that once about a really successful book, And I could see in their eyes, they were so mad that that book had been successful, but we're supposed to go like, no, it's good for all of publishing. I was like, that's not even true. Nobody goes, I bought this book, so I bought 10 others. It's just, I got into a shopping frenzy. I bought so many books. We were all secretly, not so secretly, very jealous of this person, but we all in the circle had to be like, I'm just so happy. Like, oh, it's so fake.
It's not. But I mean, and that's the human condition. It's like we have to recognize it and be like, okay, what is it that's happening inside of me that's making me feel this way? And one of the concepts I discussed in the book is this idea of insecure foundations, because fundamentally, insecurity isn't about self-esteem. It's not about feeling good about yourself. It's really a question of what is your identity secured to? And is it secured to something that is subject to other people's approval and other people's evaluation? Because that's what leads to insecurity. So recognize, what is my identity secured to? In this moment for you, you know, we just talked about this, book sales, my goodness, we're authors. So it's like, if my book doesn't sell so much or doesn't get an award or recognition, then now I'm crushed, right?
Oh yeah.
Because part of my identity is secured to that. So that's recognized. This idea of reframe. So it was something that came to me as I was going through my own process to get free from toxic comparison. And I know you know this as someone who has like a marketing background, but in marketing and politics, the idea of reframing is really about changing the way that you see something. It's about changing your vantage point, changing your context. And so what reframing does is it helps you to see whatever it is that's triggering your insecurity differently. So let's just say that somebody, you know, you're launching a business or you're trying to lose weight, and you see someone wildly successful in their business, or you see someone dropping weight like water. And your first, you know, inclination would be to be like, oh gosh, you know, they're always winning, you know, they're always succeeding. But what reframing does is it makes you say, wow, they're always winning, they're always succeeding. What can I learn from them? So now it's no longer about seeing them as competition. It's really about seeing them as inspiration. And what can I learn from them to aid my purpose? And the third part of this framework, again, the idea of releasing, is just getting to the place where you no longer allow what you see to trigger what you see about yourself. So just because somebody else succeeds, I no longer see myself as a failure just because of their success. And that happens when we adopt a humility mindset. What is humility? Humility is so misunderstood. People think it's about thinking lowly of yourself. No, humility is about simply fully occupying your lane in life, whatever that is. Listen, I will never be a best-selling fiction writer. Like, that's just not my lane. Why would I be upset that a fiction author is doing amazing things? That's not my lane. And so release it. I'm no longer triggered by another person's success because I know what my lane is. So that's the framework.
Well, and I think the reframe, what's interesting about that is you're 100% right. If you don't reframe it, you don't get to learn from so many things. Like, because you miss. So like the other day, we realized the team that I work with, that because Instagram is not showing a lot of love to photos. I'm not blaming you specifically as a Facebook employee and member of Meta, but Reels, like Reels is the thing. Yeah. So we saw a friend of ours named Sean animated one of his tweets, like it was a screenshot. He animated it, went through the roof. We're like, oh, we need to put a little animation, a little bit of music, turn that tweet into a reel. I got the game, and I wasn't mad at Sean. I wasn't like, I'm so jealous he figured that out. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna do that. And so then I was able to learn versus shut off and go, oh, I'm mad that Sean figured something out. Instead, I can go, good for Sean. Like I'm gonna figure that out too. And so I think that's one of the powerful things about Reframe is that it opens you up to so many other sources. Like when I saw Tom Brady, you live in Florida, I saw Tom Brady play once for Tampa Bay. And I was inspired. Like I wanted to do push-ups and eat better. Like I was like, because there was like that sense of like, okay, you're around greatness. Yes. Like, okay, I want to be great too. So it's funny. If you're open to it, you can then go, okay, I get inspired. Absolutely. I want to do it. Which of the three do you think people have the most trouble with? Like if you had to say, okay,
the first
recognize.
One. Yeah, recognize. Okay. Because I think somehow we've been conditioned to believe that if we admit insecurity, that's what makes us insecure.
Yep.
So we'll deny it all day long. We will just say, oh, I appreciate them. I think they're so great, so amazing. While on the inside, we're dying. We can't even get to reframe. We can't even get to release without starting there. We've got to start with recognition.
Yeah, if you can't recognize it, you can't fix it. Have you seen that with successful people you're around? Like when because you get to big rooms and you get to spaces in your job, in your career, where you're with people that you would think on the outside, they've got it all together. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same kind of insecurities that like normal people do. They've reached a certain level. Do you ever recognize that in people that you go, oh, wow, even the most successful sometimes they have the biggest insecurities because they're just trying to fill that insecurity with even bigger success?
Jon, I tell this story in the book where I was speaking at a church. This is a very, very large church, mega church. And I was heading out to worship because I always like to participate in worship before I speak. Well, the pastor of the church, who was very well known, he had his assistant grab me because he wanted to meet with me. Now, mind you, Jon, I'm thinking, oh man, this is about to be like really deep. Like maybe he's been praying about something and he wants me to speak. I don't know. So I go back to his office and I'm like, wow, he's about to say something really deep. Jon, this pastor was like, Nona, can you get me a blue check? And now, I kid you not, like this is a pastor who regularly flies.
Because you work for Facebook.
Yes, but this is what he said that helped me realize just how high insecurity can climb up the so-called ladder. This is what he said. I said to him, I'm happy to try to help. I can't guarantee anything. He says to me, oh man, well, if you can make it happen, that would be so great because my friends will be so jealous. Right. Now I'm thinking, wait, so they're not jealous about your best-selling books. They're not jealous about you having thousands of members. They're not jealous about you flying on private planes. Like they would be jealous about a blue check. And so it helped me to see in that moment, like, no, this thing plagues us regardless of our success.
Yeah, and that is so funny to me. And I think what Nona just said is she would love y'all to DM her for a blue check. Is that what if you're listening right now and you're like, I would love Nona to hook me up. She's got a pocket full. She's just got stacks. She's just throwing them out. That is, I guarantee, I've never thought about that before, but I guarantee anyone who works at Facebook, even like in a small position, has friends go, hey, I got a new skateboard Instagram that I would love to get a blue check on. Why don't you hook me up?
I had a pastor who I think he had like 200 followers maybe. And he was like, I really need a blue check because I'm being impersonated. And I was like, there's no way. But
no one. That is so funny. I hadn't thought about that wrinkle of your job. I want to transition a little bit to, let's talk Facebook, because you've got this amazing position. That's where we first connected, is in a speaking event. So how long have you worked at Facebook? What do you do at Facebook? Do you and Mark Zuckerberg like do that windsurfing thing he's into? Like, tell me about Facebook.
So I've actually been with the company for 5 years, and I have the privilege of leading a team that's comprised of a few different functions. One is our North America Community Partnerships team, which really works with organizations and public figures and leaders who are using Facebook platforms in order to build community. And so you will see things like, Peloton as a brand. They have a really thriving community on Facebook. And so you'll have other people. We have a community called Octo Nation, which is doing an incredible job gathering people together who love octopi. So all of those things are cool. Then I also am responsible for our Global Faith Partnerships team, which works with houses of worship of all type all around the world. As well as our product team. And so, it's every day is different. No, I have not been windsurfing with Mark just yet.
That's probably going to be the title of this podcast. I need some listens.
Oh my gosh.
I got to have the title's going to be like, has she windsurfed with Mark Zuckerberg? Question mark. Listen, you'll be shocked. Like that's how I'm going to have to, I don't want to have to write that, but that's what people need. But to your point about community, we have a Facebook community that has like 17,000 people in it.
Wow.
And they're amazing. And they go to each other's weddings and will support each other through cancer. It's been really fun. What would you say if somebody's listening to today and they're like, oh, okay, I recognize the value of a Facebook community and what social media, because we often hear about the negatives. Like we hear a lot about the negatives, but the flip side, the positive that you'd encourage any listener to go, hey, if you've got a goal and you want some encouragement, or if you want to grow your own community, what are some tips to engaging a Facebook community in a healthy way?
Well, so let me first distinguish between, because there's a personal profile, there's a page, and then there's a community. So your personal profile is, of course, how you show up on Facebook as yourself. So that would be how you show up to your friends and your family. Your page could be, maybe it's your brand presence, or maybe it's just a place where you represent your business. Now, your community is the place where you want to gather people together around a shared interest in order to facilitate conversation and relationships. That's a very different use case than for your profile or for your page. And so what I encourage people to do is, if you are passionate about a topic and you know other people that may be similarly passionate, that's the perfect reason to create a Facebook community. And you would be shocked, to your point, the depth of relationships that are forged in these communities, because sometimes people feel alone. Like, I mean, how many people do you know that love octopi, that just go like love looking at pictures of octopi and go to aquariums?
I thought you were going to talk about people who had 8 kids. Like when you said we have an octo community, I was like, it's just that one lady? Lady?
I'm sure there is.
That's what I thought. I was like, well, there was 2 paths. It was the lady who has 8 kids or octopus. And I was like, I made a guess. I was wrong.
She might have a fan community. I wouldn't be surprised.
She does. She probably does. So, but no, you're right. In my town, if I was into octopus, I would probably feel very lonely unless I knew there were other people that, and I was actually in a big virtual event recently where somebody wanted to talk about octopus. And now I would be like, well, they have that. Facebook has that.
So I mean, that's truly what I think is one of the greatest advantages of the platform, is you get to meet people who have shared interests. And yes, we know that there is content on the platform that isn't fun, to put it mildly.
Welcome to humanity. Welcome to humans.
Look,
welcome to humans.
People are people everywhere they go, in person and online. And so,
It's so funny. Well, I only have 3 more questions because I know you're about to jump on a plane. You're all over the place right now. You've got like 17 different jobs. I love watching you do what you do. It's super inspiring to me. But 3 questions left. First one is, you're an avid runner. You've run 13 half marathons if your bio's up to date, and 1 was in Paris, France. How did you get into running? What do you love about running?
Man, so I would have never imagined that I would be a runner. So 10 years ago, I was very close to 300 pounds. I was 100 pounds heavier, 120 pounds heavier than I am today. And I had 2 young boys. I felt tired all the time. My joints ached all the time. I had tried fad diets and all that, and I would lose weight here and there, but I'd always gain it back. And then one day I just made the decision that I was going to do the thing that I had never done before. I was going to just eat right and exercise. I was going to just do the
That's crazy. What a concept. What a concept.
Revolutionary concept, guys. But what I did, because I would always admire runners, like I would see people out running for just no reason.
You live in Florida. Everybody's running, it's so attractive. Everybody in Florida is so attractive. You have like 2 types of people: attractive people and people who own fan boats. Whoa, those are the 2.
But I would see people running down the street, and I think I was just intrigued. I was like, why are you running and no one is chasing you? Like it just didn't compute. And so I decided, man, I want to be a runner. So I downloaded the Couch to 5K app, did that over 9 weeks. Then I signed up for my first half marathon. It was like 8 months away. My goal was just to run the race. Like I didn't plan to PR. I wasn't trying to do anything. I just wanted to run it straight through. And I think I ran it in like 2 hours and 27 minutes. And when I crossed that finish line, John, there was something that happened. Like I cried, because not only was I 60 pounds lighter by then, but I realized I could do something that I never would have thought was possible. And so I got back to my hotel room that day and I signed up for another race.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's what's up, Nona. Oh, I love it. And you use the momentum of that first one to go, let's go. We're doing a second one.
Yep.
I love it. Well, as a runner myself, it's always fun to hear somebody else's kind of origin story. Second question. What is on like your Mount Rushmore of nonfiction books? So I'll ask the question that way, or what's a book you've given away more than any other book other than your own? So like for me, War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, I give people a lot of copies of that because that's one of those nonfiction books. It helps me with fear. It helps me with resistance. What's a nonfiction book that you're like, oh man, this is a book I really like?
So Essentialism by Greg McKeown is I give it to my team. I tell friends to read it because, and you know this, like, man, it's so easy to get caught up in the rat race of just doing everything and being everywhere simply because you don't want to disappoint people. But I think what that book did is it really challenged me to get super crisp on what am I living for? and what am I filling my life with that is taking me from what I'm really living for? And so it helped me get like really laser focused on that. Essentialism. And I just finished a book. It's Deep Work. Hold on. Deep Work.
Oh, Cal Newport.
Yes, Cal Newport. I just finished it. Amazing. I love it. So those are two books I would definitely recommend.
Those are great answers. And I love that you use the word crisp. Like that's a great way to think about priorities. Like I like crisp. I was like, oh, I like that. I like that. Last question. This one's a super easy one. Where can people find out more about you? Where can they get the new book? Give us all the things.
Oh, cool. Well, so you can go to killingcomparison.com to learn more about the book, to order it. And then you can find me on all the social platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, even TikTok. And I just joined TikTok. I'm trying to figure it out. My handle is the same across all. It's at Nona, not Nora.
Nona, not Nora. That's great. All right, Nona, I'm so glad we got to do this. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on all the stuff you're working on. It is super inspiring. You talk about that difference between comparison and inspiring. I think another thing that helps is when you get to know the person. There's been people I've been comparing myself to, and then I meet them and I realize they are completely unhateable. Like they're just like another and they're like, I don't know how that book blew up. Like, I don't, and you go, oh, and you didn't get successful as a way to make me feel bad. That wasn't your motivation. Interesting. You don't say. So I love that we've gotten to know each other. I look forward to doing another event with you in the future. I want to go to that event that apparently was titled Everyone But Nona. That felt like the name of that conference was like, no one tell Nona was the name of that event. It was in Memphis. It was a very big event. It's called No One Tell Nona. And unfortunately, Nona found out about it.
This is so great. Great.
Just had your picture on it with a big X through it. And they were like, make sure Nona doesn't find out about it. They were like, what's your name? My name's Mary. You're hired. It's not Nona. You can be on this event. That's what it feels like when you do comparison.
No Nona's allowed.
Yeah, no Nona's allowed. We have a zero Nona policy. So we have very low tolerance for Nona. That's so funny. That's so funny. Nona, this has been a blast. Safe flight, safe travels the rest of the day. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, John. This is such a delight. We got to do this again. I appreciate you.
Awesome. We will. Thanks, Nona.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my interview today with Nona Jones. We'll put all the links in the show notes as always. And thank you for reviewing my podcast. The reviews you write are super duper helpful. So keep those coming. I really appreciate it. Please make sure you subscribe or follow or whatever it is the kids are saying these days. And please write a review. I'll see you next week. And remember, all it takes is a goal. And don't forget to pick up your copy of the Finish Calendar. Brand new, massive, beautiful, double-sided, vertically or horizontally, paper or dry erase at finishcalendar.com. Once again, that's finishcalendar.com.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast and to get access to today's show notes and exclusive content from Jon Acuff, visit acuff.me/podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast.